Hello, this is Rajesh Vedanthan from NYU Grossman School of Medicine. I am delivering lecture 6A of Module 6. The title of my presentation is Connecting and Collaborating Across the Implementation Research Community. No corporate disclosures. These are some of the federal and foundation grants that I might refer to during my presentation today. And this diagram, as you now are well aware, is a conceptual diagram of the roadmap that's guiding you along this course and helping you become expert at implementation research. The lecture today is the first lecture of Module 6, which is applying implementation research approaches to your work, really helping you try and launch forward. And so my lecture overview is really to, again, reiterate the team science approach to implementation research and to sort of look through at some of the both challenges and opportunities related to working across disciplines, countries, and cultures, which is really the sort of fundamental nature of global implementation research related to non-communicable diseases. To provide just a sampling of some of the training opportunities, additional training opportunities that are available for folks interested in implementation research. And then a final couple of slides and comments on the concept of mentorship versus sponsorship. So, if you recall from my first lecture from Module 1, I was describing implementation research as an interdisciplinary science, and now I added a new phrase called interdisciplinary team science, really recognizing that all these different methodological approaches, whether it's qualitative, whether it's quantitative, whether it's economic, whether it's technological, there's not one person who can do all of those things. And really, in order to be able to have a successful implementation research project, and career, it's very important to be able to work with experts from these different respective fields in a team science type of fashion. If you recall, I had described previously different ways to think about working across disciplines, a multidisciplinary approach in which the contributions of each discipline are thought of as being sort of sequential and independent. Interdisciplinary, where there's a little bit more interactive approach and contribution in a joint fashion. But really, the goal for implementation research is ideally to try and achieve a transdisciplinary approach, where it's really an integrative, synthetic, common language that is now formed across all these different disciplines in a common endeavor. There are, however, some challenges with working across these different disciplines. Sometimes it is not natural for folks in these different disciplines, whether it's qualitative, whether it's quantitative, whether it's economic, whether it's clinical, whether it's evaluative, et cetera. There can be some challenges. One is the velocity of engagement, and related to that is this idea of planning versus actual implementation. There are certain fields and certain individuals who will be really interested and keen to just get their hands dirty, jump in, let's try and make things happen. We'll learn lessons as we get our work done. And there are other fields and other individuals who will be much more, let's say, cautious or wanting to do a lot of pre-planning and pre-preparation. And that there can be tension there in teams and across members of the team with respect to that issue. The other issue that sometimes arises is the idea that implementation research occurs within real-world contexts and real-world life circumstances, and those can sometimes be in conflict and can challenge concepts of scientific quote-unquote purity. And then finally, anytime that you are working across disciplines, there can be a sense or a conflict sometimes about like my team versus our team. Let's say if I'm working with somebody from informatics and they say, oh, my informatics team versus your implementation team. Well, that can be a tension if you're really trying to have it be this transdisciplinary, syncretic, sort of synthesized whole. when people think of themselves as sort of separate components. That can be a challenge as well. One of the issues that I raised earlier in my first presentation, I wish to come back to, again, is the idea that implementation research happens within real-world contexts and circumstances, and generally will be more of a pragmatic approach with this Pressix 2 wheel being scored in a higher fashion and sort of with an outline that's a little bit larger, obviously, than the more sort of quote unquote explanatory, scientifically pure trials. And that can also be a challenge sometimes when trying to think about how to bring people together to accept that there will be challenges and circumstances and real world events and contexts that may prevent a very sort of purely controlled clinical trial that some team members may be used to in previous studies. Then the other set of challenges that can happen across countries and cultures, especially when we're trying to do global implementation research and trying to have partnerships and collaborations across countries, and sometimes across countries from different economic settings or backgrounds, and et cetera. And so I think one of the most important things I would say really is to try and embed these collaborative relationships and partnerships in mutual trust, mutual respect, and mutual benefit for all parties coming together. And I think if we are able to achieve, or at least work towards, mutual trust, mutual respect, and mutual benefit, we'll be able to navigate some of those challenges and conflicts that can happen when working across countries and cultures. So what are some of those? And a lot of them do boil down to power imbalances across countries of, let's say, different economic or sort of status or origin or development status, et cetera. The reality is that the practice of global health and even global implementation research related to health has not fully shed itself of some of the historical legacies and vestiges of colonialism and all of the sort of challenges that arose or negative sort of aspects that were characterized by that historical period, including forced displacement of populations, exploitation of resources, extraction of resources, racism, economic imbalances and inequalities, et cetera. Some of those historical legacies and vestiges remain with us in the context of global health and in the context of global implementation research. And I think just important to be conscientious of those, conscious of those, aware of those, as we try and work towards mutual trust, mutual respect, and mutual benefit. Some of the power imbalances also relate to sources of funding. Sources of funding coming, many times from high-income countries with priorities and scientific areas of inquiry that are determined by those high-income countries, sometimes relevant, sometimes maybe not so relevant to the low and middle-income country settings, and so that's important. Power imbalances that may be reflected in the context of who is considered the prime institution for the grant. Is the prime institution the institution in the high-income country, or is the prime institution the low and middle-income country institution? And again, what does that mean in terms of the power vested in that prime institution and where that institution is located? This can manifest in issues with respect to budget decisions, and very importantly, with respect to indirect costs, which can be unequal and relatively inequitable across different countries and places as well. There are then challenging decisions that need to be made and addressed in the context of working across countries and cultures. Who owns the data? If the research, let's say in my case, if the research is taking place in Kenya, but NYU in the United States is the prime institution, sponsor is the NIH, who owns that data? Is the data controlled and managed locally at the Kenyan level? Is it managed and controlled by us in the United States? And if so, which entity, et cetera? So those challenging decisions need to be addressed and navigated in, again, a responsible manner. Thinking about authorship, very practical issue of, who is the lead author, who is the senior author, who is the corresponding author, what does authorship position mean for different people in different countries or at different academic ranks, et cetera. I think very important. Thinking about role expectations, there may be different role expectations for implementing partner who is in charge of implementation versus, let's say, the evaluative partner who's in charge of evaluation. So those types of role expectations, I think, very important to navigate and very explicitly lay out in a transparent manner as much as possible. Thinking about research ethics, and again, really thinking carefully about some of the sort of bedrock fundamental ethical principles of global research, thinking about beneficence, non-maleficence, autonomy, et cetera, and respect for those issues in the context of conducting global research. And again, another very practical issue that needs to be navigated related to trainees, whose trainees get to travel to which places to do what kind of work, et cetera. Each of us gets approached by trainees all the time. So is it fair for me to be able to send NYU trainees to Kenya while not necessarily being able to host Kenyan trainees at NYU? Or should there be a fully equal exchange, or can there be some other sort of arrangement that's made? Should the trainees go for research experiences versus other types of capacity building experiences? All of those very practical, challenging questions also need to be addressed in the context of team science, working across countries and cultures. Just a plug here to say that the Global Alliance for Chronic Disease has really done an incredible job creating a global implementation research network. Not to say that we're perfect or that the GACD is perfect, but we now have over a decade's worth of experience, multiple funding cycles, multiple different types of research networks that have been created, collaborative partnerships that have been created, navigating many of these challenging issues. And so even just the human resources embedded within the GACD is a great resource in terms of being able to try and navigate some of these issues, get guidance, get advice, get some brainstorming. And I would encourage all of us to really leverage now this connection to the GACD research network in its entirety in terms of the benefits that may accrue in terms of really helping to navigate some of these challenging issues with respect to working across multiple disciplines or working across multiple countries. I'm going to now transition a little bit to training opportunities that are available to the global implementation science community. And again, this extends beyond just the GACD. Here is a sampling of the different types of capacity building opportunities available through the GACD. Obviously, faculty members themselves who may be available for guidance or mentorship, different training events, master classes, the GACD eHub, which is a great electronic resource, online resource, various different schools and workshops as well, this one obviously being one of those. And I'll just now mention a few non-GACD implementation science training opportunities, but these are just a sampling because there are many, many now that have proliferated and have developed over time. But this is one, the HIV, Infectious Disease and Global Health Implementation Research Institute, IIRI, run out of the Washington University in St. Louis. Really a fantastic training institute that involves both in-person training for a week as well as sort of remote mentorship over the course of 1 to 2 years. Another training opportunity available through the World Health Organization, a massive open online course on implementation research made available really to anyone around the world. Many resources also through the National Institutes of Health within the United States, and specifically the National Cancer Institute. They have an open access sort of portal to be able to access resources and webinars and lectures available through the Training Institute for Dissemination and Implementation Research. They say specifically to cancer, but much of the content is actually applicable to anyone in any field. In addition to those resources, there are all these webinars that are also available. It looks like they're done on a different sort of frequency. It's not 100% predictable, but going to the website and looking into their events, possible to really be able to get some great topics presented by really leading folks around the world. The University of Washington has a fantastic implementation science resource hub with various resources that you can access: an introduction to implementation science, a very nice practical step-by-step guide to conducting implementation research, and then specific training opportunities available at the University of Washington. The other resources that are available are conferences, both within the United States that I'm familiar with, but also internationally as well. This is one that's quite famous and popular, the annual conference on the science of dissemination and implementation in health. They actually have specific global health tracks, and it's a really wonderful sort of bringing together of the community of folks involved in D&I research. A lot of it from the United States, but actually increasingly from around the world as well. Now, just final few words on the sort of distinction between mentorship and sponsorship. I think very important for anyone at any level, but really junior researchers and folks who are starting off their academic careers, to engage, to be able to try and secure both mentors and sponsors. So there's a little cartoon here that sort of tries to illustrate the difference between mentorship and sponsorship. Mentor asking the question, have you tried applying to speak at conferences and meetups? So really sort of prompting the person to think about opportunities that might be available. In contrast to a sponsor who, on the right, says, I recommended you for this speaking gig, can you do it? So really a sponsor who actually sort of manifests those opportunities in sort of very concrete terms. And so, there's obviously a lot of overlap between mentorship and sponsorship, but the idea is that mentorship really is about thinking about career development, focusing on personal and professional development, really usually a long-term transformative relationship between mentor and mentee, and very important. I would say, they say here early in the career, but I think even throughout all stages of the career. Sponsorship, in contrast, is very much about sort of very concrete material opportunities for career advancement, focusing on specific opportunities. Can sometimes be more of a almost like transactional relationship rather than a long-term relationship. Can be episodic. Again, here it says critical later in the career, but I would say it's very important throughout. And then there's obviously a lot of overlap between mentorship and sponsorship. But I think very important to really think about having either one individual or a team of individuals who serve both a mentor and a sponsor type role. Not necessarily that they're going to be the same person or group of people, but having folks who are going to be looking out for you in those various respects. And then this final slide here is really, again, just thinking through some of the differences between mentor and sponsor. So a mentor who talks with you versus a sponsor who talks about you, a mentor who advises as opposed to a sponsor who acts, a mentor who helps you prepare, whereas a sponsor actually makes sure that you have all the right roles, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And so there's a sort of a series of distinctions between mentors and sponsors. Again, sometimes those qualities can be embodied in the same person. Oftentimes they are embodied in different people. And I think as any sort of person involved in academic implementation research or academic global health or any sort of academic career, important to have in sort of an entirety a group of folks who are going to be able to provide both mentorship and sponsorship throughout your career. So key messages for this brief lecture today: really the idea that implementation research involves team science, that team science can occur across disciplines, but also across countries and cultures, that there can obviously be challenges, but these challenges can definitely be overcome. And many of us here at the Global Alliance for Chronic Diseases are, sort of examples of the fact that we've navigated some of these challenges and have been able to be successful navigating them. That there are multiple training opportunities available, and to be honest with you, an increasing number of training opportunities available, some funded, some non-funded, but really an increasing source of training opportunities. And then finally, again, that sort of difference between mentorship and sponsorship, and really trying to think about trying to have both of those types of support systems as part of your sort of advisory circle for career advancement. And so with that, I wish to say thank you very much.